Tired of the noise and spin? Join the MiddleGround Mic Patreon for 7 days for free. And then it's just $1 a month afterwards. Real talk, real people right now. Sign up today, middlegroundmic.com. Click on the button. All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to the MiddleGround Mic. We got a great guest on here today, Tenia Davis. I think I said your name correct.
You did. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and so looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, like I said, like we were talking earlier, I love, you're focused on obviously HR, but the leadership, the common ground part, like you were talking about as well, and just like the leadership aspect of it overall. And that is just so hard to find. And you had like definitely like a unique perspective, especially, the leadership end of it because, your positions, but then also because it was HR.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people don't have both sides of it, because when you're just in that solo leadership role, you tend to go, hey, HR, what do I do? Or, hey, this person, where you have both experiences. And I think that gives you like a very unique perspective.
And sometimes challenging, right? Because we're always looking for the balance. I know I'm always looking for the balance. And I so love the whole premise around common ground, because especially in our current state, there's just, there's more of a toxic behavior than alignment. And I truly believe people want to work together, want to have alignment. It's just, how do you get there? Right. I think there's more of a focus on, you're right, I'm wrong. I have this opinion. You have to have the same opinion. And it takes away from the uniqueness that we all bring to the table. But when we can acknowledge and respect the different voices that are in the room, I think it just brings out a totally different energy. Right. And I think that's really what people really are seeking, whatever environment they're in, whether it's the workplace or whether it's their home or wherever it might be. They want to have some sort of environment where they can all coexist. I think coexist is very important, and establish community. And I think that's really what people are looking for today is, where's their village, their tribe, their community, and how do they establish that? And that typically is a nice mix of many things and many folks.
Yeah, they kind of like the community part you talk about. And I think that's like especially even bigger in the workplace, which people are seeking just as much as they are a little bit at home, but they seek it more at work because they have to go there. So they can't hide from it. Whereas if you're at home, you're like, oh man, the outside world's gone from me.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that the younger generation doesn't want that quote unquote lifelong employer. No, they really do. They're just having a hard time finding who they connect with to make that long-term employment. And I think that it's a very misunderstood thing in the corporate world today. I see it among fellow people in my position, and I'm like, no, if you get these kids and you treat them right and you talk to them right, you're going to win their loyalty. And they'll stick with you through thick and thin.
And manage expectations. So yes to all of that. I totally agree. And it's also managing the expectations. I think in the workplace today, because you do have this convergence of different work styles, generations, there are different approaches. And so you have some folks that want to come to work, they just want to do the job and go home. And then you have some, they look for their community. I always say the company and the community, they look for both and for a blend, right? And so there's that acknowledgement as well. And so I think managing the expectations is actually the hardest part of that. And I think that's sometimes where people get disgruntled, right? And when you have disgruntled employees, that just spreads like wildfire. And so it's finding that happy balance and common ground around why you mentioned earlier, why are we here? What are we doing? What is our purpose? What is our goal? And once that is established, kind of rally folks around that. And so even with the different styles, approaches, if everyone knows kind of what is the mission or core purpose of what they're doing, it helps in establishing those relationships and also keeping folks focused on the work itself. Otherwise, what I've seen is sometimes there's I call misfire of expectation. And, you have some folks that just want you to do the job and they're satisfied with that. And then you have others that need the relationship, that want the relationship. And so their community and company is blended together. Right. And sometimes that's where I've seen a disconnect. And then there's maturity that's kind of mixed in there too. Right. And so it's also having the leadership that's mature enough to kind of take everybody where they are and build the bench from there versus trying to make folks carbon copies of themselves. That tends not to work.
Yeah, I experience that sometimes. So I'm sure, as you can tell, I generally connect with people pretty easy. It's just something that just comes easy to me. Just, based on my line of work. I mean, if you can't do that, you're probably going to fail at what you do. But, like, so when I experience someone who's not as, I don't want to say like easy, when they're like very like closed off.
Yeah.
I'm always kind of like, okay, like I sit there and I think, and then I watch their behaviors. When they do talk, I try to hear what they're talking about. And then I try to find something to relate to them with in relations to that. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I had a manager where, God, I don't know, what, we're July now? So probably took me like 6 months to really get her to be like, hey boss, how
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah.
Whereas before that, it was just cut and dry. And, for me, that's very hard when for someone like myself, it's very
Yeah.
hard when you interact with someone
Yeah.
like that. You're kind of like, what do I say to this person? Like, I feel
Well,
like
and it
I'm like
slows the work
offending them.
down, and it can slow the
Yeah.
work down. Yeah, I used to work with someone, and I totally originally I didn't understand her philosophy, but I totally understand it now. And she there's in terms of who she worked with, she really didn't care. Blue hair, red hair, didn't really care as long as they all had the same energy and passion around the work. That was just so important to her. And I totally get it because when people are aligned around the passion, it does make getting the work out the door a lot faster. It builds to trust a lot faster, and your values are more aligned.
I had a general manager tell one of a different general manager, like, yeah, hey, Joe doesn't do very well with what ifs. He kind of expects a GM or somebody to kind of come to him with some idea of what's going to happen or what they're thinking. Don't come to him
Wow.
with a what if, because he's going to give you a look. And I was like, I think that's more of somebody, if I know they've done the job for a while, I kind of look at them like, you don't have an idea of what you want to do with that. Now, if you're
Yeah.
new and you don't know what you're going
Right.
to do,
Yeah.
fair enough. I'm not going to, but and I looked at this gym that said that and I said, I look at you like that because I hired you when you were 16 and you're almost 30.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
personally hired you. I did your
Wow.
paperwork. Yeah, I did your paperwork.
Yeah.
I sent you to orientation. So I know what you're about. I know you know what to do. So when you say that, I look at you like, what? Like,
Well,
you
I
know
mean,
the
and that's
answer to that
true.
question.
Most leaders, when they hire you, they want you to do your job. If you have to tell them step one, this is what you do. Okay, step two, this is what you do. Step three, then how do you learn, right? I'm always it's always interesting to me when and I've seen it with some folks. Well, you didn't tell me what to do. Oh, well, you didn't tell me I had to do that. Okay, then what is it that you do exactly? And so, it's really interesting. But I so enjoy. I've worked with some folks that I mean, you just give them an idea and they run with it. And I think that creates such an energy around the work, ownership. Also, you can tap into their gifts. I think everyone has a superpower. Play it a superpower, right? There are many aspects of HR. Benefits is not high on my list.
Yeah,
You
no,
got it. I love benefits, but for some, that jazzes them. Absolutely run with it, right? Absolutely. And so I think when you play to people's strengths, you tend to get more out of individuals realistically. And now you might have some folks that feel that they can, build a plane and you're like, huh? Okay. But I think that for the most part, I do believe people show up to do a great job. People show up to really contribute. I do believe that. It's just the conditions that they're in if they're able to do that. And I think that's where good leadership comes into place. Good leadership is not always, hi, how you doing? Hey, it's not always the vibrato of happiness, I call it. But I think sometimes that's misleading. But it's more so, hey, here's what you're doing well. Here's some things you might need to focus on. Here's how can I help you? Right. So I think it's also providing feedback and the path for people to have success. The worst thing a leader can do is avoid conflict, avoid giving feedback, avoid interaction. That's the worst thing a leader. That's not leadership. And so I think being a leader today is exercising different muscles that leaders did not have to use years back, right? So it's not just having the technical chops, but it's also knowing how to engage with individuals authentically, right, to get the best results. And I think that's where leaders have challenged, or they don't want to offend, or they don't know how to say, or maybe they never work. They really don't have people with blue hair as friends, really, right? But at work, they're having to work with these people that might be odd to them. Okay, well, why are they odd? And so they're not taking the time to really know the environment and they're still working through some of maybe their perceptions, right? And so all of that gets in the way of actually getting the work done. And so how do you collectively, to your point, build the common ground of understanding and connection? And I think it's all about community. It's all about connection and community. And the organizations that I've seen truly excel at that are organizations that have mastered having a very diverse community and having a collective understanding of how the work gets done and how they celebrate that.
Yeah, the case point, like when you're talking about celebrating, so a good like round of few off from what you said is, I think a good way to tell, there's always this big thing to where everybody wants a gold star, and I think that it's misunderstood to a degree. People want the gold star, but they want the gold star from an environment that works.
Yes.
Because if they don't trust their environment, the gold star is very hollow. So like I tell people, if let's say you have a company picnic and not very many people come. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a company picnic and nobody comes, that means nobody trusts your workplace.
Exactly.
And I don't think that bridge is kind of there. Like people don't want to understand that part. They think, oh, well, people don't want to participate. No, people don't feel comfortable
Yeah.
participating.
Trust. It has a lot to do with
Yes.
trust. It's just like, it's always interesting when I hear leaders say, well, they're just so quiet or they don't give feedback. Well, it depends on how you ask the question. If you're asking the question for validation, that's different than asking the question in terms of input and contributing, right? So if you really want the person to contribute, right, it might come nuanced and a little bit different than how you might approach it. But if you're looking for the feedback or communication to be validation, then employees pick up on that quickly, right? And they quickly determine if they want to engage, trust, or have any sort of working rapport with the individual.
Yeah, yeah. I was very fortunate when I was coming up through the ranks of everything. As when I was a general manager, God, I felt like I was one forever. And I was at the same store for like so long because every time they pulled me out of there, they put me back because it was always just something. And I was like, okay, so I was ended up back there. And I worked with a lot of young people who were, if you want to call it the purple hair or the woke types of, I guess we would call them now. And so it forced me. I'm like, okay, well, this is my environment of people that my pool of employees. So I had to learn how to work with them. And it ended up being one of those beneficial experiences of my life because it taught me to try to understand and figure out how the newer generations are working. And, I had one, her name is Kristen. I won't say her full everything, but she's very big into women's rights and all this stuff. And it really taught me how to, I guess you're going to say, conduct myself in a manner that would be a little bit more cohesive with how the modern woman looks at the workplace, where it's different than it was when I was a crew person, and I just had, like a lot of them just had different thoughts and different ways of doing things. And so I learned as a leader, I think it's important that you give a framework to people
Hmm.
and you let them
Yeah.
work within that framework and let them do it their way. As long as they're within that guideline,
Right.
have at it, man. Do your thing. I mean, you don't need to tell me every step by step play.
Yeah.
You got your running game. As long as you're following the rules, I don't care what
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
And when people have that trust with you, they're like,
Yes.
oh, okay. And then they're willing to give you a little bit more of a middle ground. Like, all right, yeah, okay, now I'll meet you there.
Yeah. And sometimes you can have, and sometimes conflict is good. You'll have the conflict, and conflict is good as long as it's respectful, right? But I think the
Yes.
worst thing leaders can do, one of the worst things leaders can do, is avoid the conflict, or they have the conversation outside the room. I always say outside the room, because then you don't give the person the benefit of having the conversation with you, and it tends to be undermining. So I think that, the art of conversation, communication is so important. And in that, there will be a little conflict sometimes, and it's okay to have conflict. And I think people are afraid to have conflict now, or they don't know how. Or, I've seen some situations where emotionally there's just like immature. I mean, just emotionally,
Oh, I see,
immature. And you're standing there like, what just happened? And so,
yeah,
you definitely, that has to be balanced out too. And people determine how they want to interact after that, right?
yeah.
And so EQ skills, very important.
Did you, from your perspective, did you have to learn to kind of, especially as the modern times have come about, did you have to learn to, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, regulate yourself, you know,
Oh,
when they
you
have
know,
some of their
mm,
issues?
I I have a pretty calm demeanor. So, in situations, especially if it's charged, I'm more of a listener and observer. In a highly charged environment. Now, did I have to learn? Yes, definitely had to learn how to use the pause button so that I don't react in the moment or react to a situation. I was in one situation where I was being totally yelled at. I mean, like yelled at in front of my peers. Like I had never experienced that in my entire career. Like yelled. I mean, it was an emotional throw up. And, I was very still. And, the first thing that crossed my mind is, wow, this person must really be in pain, or what have they held on to all this time? And so it wasn't about me in that moment. It was really about that person. But it does take a level of maturity to know not to respond, not to react, and to approach the situation when things have calmed down, right? However, what's important after that is to how do you re-engage, and then how do you establish moving forward, what are the expectations from both individuals moving forward, right? So if something triggered the person, or if that's just the way the person responds to things, what agreement will those two individuals make moving forward? And I think that's where people truly mature and move on. And I say for both, right? And I'm just saying, it takes two to tango. And in some situations, some leaders just hold on to it. Well, you have no control over that. Those leaders tend not to grow, and that's for them to decide. But if you're looking at it as how do I learn and grow from this, and that's typically so if you're asking me, I look at whatever the situation is, how can I learn and grow from this situation? I don't want any particular bad experience to ever define me. So how can I learn and grow from it, right? And make it more about me versus the other person. I tend to find more peace with that, because especially human resources, no one's going to agree with everything you have to say. So, I always say, human resources, we tend to be last on the friend list. And that's, and I joke about that, but that's not actually true. I've had great friends throughout organizations, and it's how you engage. And if you respect, and if you're consistent, and you truly honor and value the environment you're in, people notice that as well. So even if they disagree with you, the disagreement engagement tends to be a little bit different and less personal, right? And so, I've had some very interesting teachable moments, and I just choose to take them as teachable moments. And how can I personally learn and grow, to do the things that I want to do in my journey? And, I think everything happens for a reason, whether it's good or bad. Bad can turn out to be good. And so, but you can't let other folks' energy around that, um, trigger or, dictate how you respond.
Yeah, and that's something that is that's a learned behavior for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't think that some of them really truly understand that.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, how do you go about this? And they're like, well, I'm gonna do ABC. Don't respond. And there's still some days where I have to tell myself that don't respond, Drew. Just don't respond. Because in my head, I want to look at that person and be like, listen, man, this is what we do. Da da da. It's that easy. But I'm like, just let the process play out.
Yeah, and
It
just
is
move
so hard.
on, and just move on. And I just say it's just not that serious.
No, it's
It's
not.
just not that serious. And the reality is that you're not going to make everybody happy, right? And so, some people are just unhappy anyway, or maybe you did make them unhappy. I don't know. Everybody has their. That's why I say it takes two. There's an energy to and an energy from. But I think what's most important is to learn from the situation, so that next time, you're smarter, better, stronger, and able to show up better in the world. And I think that's what's most important. Is, at least for me, I want to show up in the world in a productive way. And common ground is very important to me. And I think you can just
And
get more out of life that way.
I appreciate that. The one thing I love is that the common ground and middle ground like appears in every episode so many times. It's because it resonates with everybody.
It does.
It's wild.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree. And it's needed today. I mean, it's
yes,
totally needed.
it's everything is just so like you can't even like. I mean, not that anybody really pays attention to the newspaper anymore. I mean, if I see one, I'll pick it up and look at it, and it's no different on there than it is on social media, than it is on TV news. And I tell people, they're like, well, where do you get your news from? I'm like, well, one site I use, I believe it's called 1440 News. They're kind of like really completely independent. They just publish what they find. But I also kind of I piece around, like I'll kind of look the same article up on like 2 or 3 different sites because each one of them has a little snippet the other one didn't put in there. And then you kind of really start to get the picture. Or I try to find the full interview, not just that 5-second clip that takes everything completely out of context of what that person was saying.
Yeah. And, and listen, and we both can be right and just have a different approaches, right?
Yes.
One could be right and one could be wrong and just have a different perspective. And that's okay. I think what we're missing in the art of communication and in the art of conflict is that it is okay to have differences. It is okay to look at the world differently. It's okay, right?
Yeah, I just don't understand where it went like that. Like where it went from maybe I was just so isolated or something and I didn't see it coming, but it just felt like it just changed. Like I personally feel that like a lot of that was kind of like happening, but I feel like the pandemic really like put it front and center.
Yeah.
Like
but I think people are wanting to sway back. At least what I hear, people are wanting, some know how and some don't, but I think people are just trying to find that equilibrium of whatever their piece needs to be. I think people are trying to find that.
Yeah, it's I tell people it's kind of like in the 1990s, right? I mean, it was the age of the internet, but the internet back then was an escape from everyday life. Where now everyday life is an escape from the internet, depending on your situation. The role reverse. People back then they got online because they wanted to connect. Where and they lost that as that became the preferred option.
Right.
So
yeah, totally agree.
and that's like with like your HR background. How did you really kind of get opposing parties? Maybe that's a good way to say it. Opposing parties to see, hey, we can connect, we can't connect. It is what it is. Like, how did you kind of really delve into that?
Yeah. Artfully, what's important is to let both sides air their position. That's what's really important. And I never take a side. And I really don't have a side. And it's more so, how can I help folks find the common ground in the situation if there is one? But I think the most important thing is letting each side air how they are thinking or feeling about the situation, or at least how it appeared to them, right? And then in that, I listen for, okay, here's really what they're saying that is the same, and then here's what's different. And I play it back. I always ask, did I understand you correct, or did I miss? Is that correct? Because really, most situations, people want to be heard. For the most part, I find that people really want some sort of conflict resolution, unless they're just undermining the organization. That's just totally different if there's a negative behavior or there's toxic behavior taking place. And sometimes that does happen too. And that behavior really is not looking for resolution. They're looking for a side, right? So I try to find where they have some sort of agreement. And I start with, what are we here for? I truly believe everybody shows up to do a good job, and we're all here to, serve the organization in different capacities, right? We just have a different view and opinion of something that's taking place. So what is that and why is that, right? It could be approach, it could be philosophy, it could be methodology, it could be many things. But to really understand that and help folks kind of work towards the middle. And then what's most important is moving forward, how do we agree to disagree? How do we manage the emotions around our interactions moving forward? Because it's not going to happen in one meeting. It's like building a muscle. How do we build this muscle so that we get better at working together? And so it takes time. I think sometimes, there's an expectation. Oh, okay, we're going to have a meeting with HR. Wave the wand. We're now working better together. It doesn't work.
Only.
No, right. It doesn't work that way. And so it's understanding the root cause of the situation. And then, how do we work on building this muscle of collaboration and working together moving forward? And I check in, okay, how's it going? Let's have straight talk. How's it working? Okay, well, this is uncomfortable. I don't like saying this. Okay, well, then how can we manage it so that it's productive? And so it's just helping each person kind of have success in what they're trying to develop. And I think that's important too, is recognizing that everything's not going to happen overnight. Relationships, it takes time to build relationships. And if you've never had conflict, I would say there's no relationship. Because if you right? And so it takes time. And so it's working with those individuals along the way to build that muscle. But it
Yeah,
does take
the funny, thing you said that, it did a little AI video that said, "Are you tired of the echo chamber?" You know, and I kinda
yeah.
posted that. So it's just funny that, you know, it 'cause just me a lot of people want, you know, if you don't have disagreement, they want, I call it the yes man, you know, they want everybody to tell them what they wanna hear.
Right. Right.
And I really I sit down with people and I'm like, "I really want you to tell me if you disagree with something. It's totally fine. My feelings won't be hurt. I just need us to be on the same page."
Paid.
At one point earlier in my career, I requested a different boss, and they were like, "Wow, you guys seem to get along." I was like, "But we're never on the same page.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's
And
going on."
sometimes that's okay. Sometimes people just don't mix, and to where I think that's the hardest when to work with someone that doesn't communicate with you or communicate around you. I mean, you can't solve for that. That tends to be about the other person and really not about you.
But, you know, and I never really faulted her for a lot of what she did. I understood the reason behind it. I would just be like, "Hey, be nice to be invited to something that has to do with me." You know, I found out once a parking lot was getting redone from, a fellow supervisor at the time of mine, and I'm like, and it was happening the next day. So I called my boss. I'm like, "Hey, parking lot's getting redone."
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling so and so about it. I'm like, "Yeah," but just kind of let me know. And
Right.
I had just talked to her earlier that day, and I'm like, you know, I'm not mad, but like, if you could just tell me, you know, I've got like 30 people I got to tell not to show up for work.
Wow.
You know, they're all
Yeah.
going to be upset if they show up here, waste their gas or their Uber money, and there ain't nowhere they can work.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
And then
you know,
sometimes
just,
circling back, to your point, I think sometimes if someone is uncomfortable with communicating, it's not like what you're describing. That might not be where their train of thought goes to first. So maybe walking them through, here's what happens if I am out of the loop, and this is the impact of that, and then these are the things that I then have to put in place or correct or quickly shift, and it becomes problematic. And sometimes people are not aware. They just might think, oh, well, he doesn't need to know. It's not a big deal. So sometimes walking folks through the impact of not having information, what that does. I'm not saying for this situation, but I've seen that as well. Communication is not maybe their superpower. It's helping them understand the impact of not having information, what it does to the
yeah,
business.
my boss would always tell me, my boss would be like, "Joe, don't get amped up. Just don't get amped up, Joe." And I'm like, yeah, because I used to when I was younger, I had a bad habit of, all right, I've said it 9 times. Now I'm just going to get direct, folks. This is what we're going to
Wow.
do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is when we're going to do it. And everybody was like, okay, yeah, he's repeated it too many times. They all just start doing it. And I'm like, if we could have just
Right.
done this before, you know? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think heavens, and no offense to the HR community, but I think heavens, we did not have a big one when I was coming up, because, woo, buddy, I would have been in trouble so many times, so many times.
They're teachable moments. They're teachable moments. And being a leader is not easy work, and it,
You
it
know,
takes
and you
trial and
learn.
error, and it takes mentorship, and it's a journey. It's a journey being a
It
leader.
really, I was fortunate, you know, and I tell people all the time, I said, you know, I always happen to be in the right place at the right time. I think that is a big part of it that people don't
Yeah.
realize. And
Yeah.
then you also you gotta go after it. You gotta go, I know that person's the smartest person in the room. I'm gonna pick his brain.
Yeah.
And so I would just go up and start going, well, why is
That's
this this?
good.
Why is that that? You know, and I tell people,
Right.
like, do that.
Yeah.
And people just looking there, just like it's such a foreign thing to them. They're like, why? I'm like,
And I think it's important to give benefit of the doubt too. I,
yeah,
I
oh
think
yeah.
we've kind of we're missing that part of it as in society today. I think giving benefit of the doubt. I've worked with some folks and it's like everybody's the enemy. They're out to get me, and I'm just perplexed. Like, why? I don't even think they know you're here. I don't know. It's not about you. I don't know, but I think benefit of the doubt is just so important, and especially if you don't know folks. And I'm always curious to know someone's story, right? And I think that's a great way to connect with people as well, because we have more in common than we do differences. Whether you're raising kids, or you have a dog, or you're from the Midwest, or you attended a small school, big school, had to work while you went to school. I mean, there's just so many different things in life that parallels with others, and I think if people hit pause more and truly give the benefit of the doubt, I think they would be able to build the community that they're seeking a lot faster and build the relationships in the workplace that they're wanting to
Yeah.
build.
And I'll throw it out there. I think the whole country and the whole world could learn a lot from Midwestern America. I've been to different parts, and you know what? People in the Midwest are more likely to try to get along than
Yeah,
not get along.
yeah.
And then when I've been to other parts of the country, people are so cold and isolated.
Mhm.
Like you can just feel it walking by them. Or yeah, I don't know about in Chicago.
Yeah,
I've been to Chicago a couple times, but here, like it's just that like that nod when someone opens the door, or whatever. Hey, that thank you. And when I've been to out to LA, New York, and it's there, but it's not there. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, now to be fair, family history is German. Now Germans aren't the most polite people in the world. To us anyways, right? To them, how they act is normal, but to us, it's rude here.
yeah,
And I just when I was in LA, I'm like, well, man, people in Michigan, they kind of look at you like, hey, did I do something to make you upset?
yeah,
And I'm like, I tell people all the time, learn from the Midwest.
yeah. I speak to everyone and I look for the kindness and enjoy what I do. And so my mindset is people can either, attach to it or reject it, or I mean, whatever they choose to do is what they choose to do. But I find people tend to be receptive. They're just waiting for someone to say hi to them, and so sometimes, I've seen people don't, they feel, is it okay to say hi? Is it okay not to say hi? And in this state, the current state, I think people just don't know or don't want to take the risk. Right.
Learning
Yeah.
to read the room.
Yeah. Read the room. Read the room is very important.
Yeah,
Very, very
that is
important.
like that is it is something you can learn, but also it's kind of something you can either do or you can't do. It's like both. You can
And a
learn
little
it
intuitive as well. A little
yeah, like you
intuitive
kind
as
of
well. Yeah.
shout out to this boss. I've known him almost 20 years. We've grown up together essentially. He got married not long after me. We've had kids in the same time frame. So just, but he told me once, he goes, Joe, read between the lines. Read between the lines. And that was like one of the most telling things, because sometimes when someone's upset or they're trying to connect, you just kind of gotta read between the lines of what they're saying, because they're just getting out the emotions that are invoked while they're
Yeah.
mad.
Right.
But you kind of got to try to really dig deep down into that issue
Yeah.
before they even do.
Right.
And
Right.
and it's just something that's hard. To me, you can either do it or you can't. Because there's some people that I've worked with that I'm like, man, this person's the smartest person in the room. They work hard to get things done. But when there's a problem, they are checked out. They instantly turn the lights off, and they vanish. You're like, where did so and so go?
Yeah.
They're nowhere to be found. And it's like, well, okay, I'm left here holding the bag. Thanks, buddy. It's so I can only imagine with your history, what you've done, how you dealt with things like
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the next leg of my journey, I can take all these wonderful things that I've learned, especially around organizational behavior, into my new venture. But I did capture some of that in my first and second book. So my first book was about servant leadership, and I tried to capture the essence of everything we've been talking about. The benefit of doubt and building communities and creating a place where people feel they can grow and flourish. But what I found is that leaders struggle with feedback. I mean, it's like kryptonite. Do I have to give it to them? Do I have to say it? And how do and then is it sugar coated? It misses the mark. And so I tried to introduce it in a way that would make it easy for leaders to follow kind of a construct of how to give feedback, because it's hard.
it.
And I mean,
It
just what you're
is.
describing, people run, they flee, and you're standing there like, well, you just told me. So now you're delivering the message on behalf of someone else, right?
Yeah,
And
you're just
so
like, thanks, buddy.
that's not productive.
But for all the leaders out there, like the one thing that I can say is when I finally got over that hump, and there was
Uh-huh.
a perception out there that I'm always kind of just to smooth it over. And once I really learned, and I had a boss, she at the time she really made me have to engage difficult
Mm,
things, and before I'd be like, oh man. And then I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired for this. Like just those
right.
things would go through your head. Right. And once I crossed that barrier, I realized it was just fear.
Yeah.
Fear was convincing me I was going to get fired for something
Yeah.
so silly.
Yeah.
And I became more confident in myself,
Hmm.
felt more secure in my job, and then I actually found that I connected with people a lot easier. And
Yeah.
when they can tell if you're comfortable or not talking to them about it.
Right.
People can read that a mile away. like a mile away, because I could always tell which of my bosses were comfortable talking with me, which
Right.
ones weren't. I've only really had one boss where I got the vibe that she was just not comfortable talking to me. And I was always just kind of like, well, this is a good thing because at least she's not going to bug me too much.
Right.
But outside of that, I generally like to have a good relationship with my bosses.
Yeah.
I tell people when I was coming up at the time, our organization only had, I think, like 10 stores. So the owner, you'd see the owner in there all the time, like at least once a week, once every other week at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
And he would always tap people on the shoulder. He'd be like, hey, how are you doing today? People have been around. He would always remember something. And that's like I told you, I write that down. He'd
Yeah.
always remember something about their kid or something. It's one of the biggest things which made me stay there because I'm like, well, it made me feel like, hey, this guy actually cares about what happens to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it made me stay. And
Yeah.
when you feel that way, it
Mhm.
becomes more than just money.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
about I want to like the money
Absolutely.
you'll learn to make what you got work
Yeah.
because you're happy.
Yeah. And that's most important to me. I can make less and be in an environment where I am totally vibing, doing my thing, because it's just not worth it. The trade-off, or at least for me, the trade-off at some point is just, you know, toxic environments, you can't change those. And so,
No,
yeah, you
and
can't change them, and they tend to be driven by other things. But, doing whatever your jam is and do it well and, with the right intentions, you're gonna do all the things that you wanna do anyway. I believe that.
yeah, and from like your perspective, there's organizations that come out there from like teeny tiny and then they grow big. What do you see are like the biggest like challenges that maybe they ignore or that should be obvious but are not? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, what I've seen is when the employees don't understand the mission of the organization. So they're not aligned around something, right? Or if there is a lack of communication and transparency, whatever that means to that organization. Minus information, people tend to make it up, right? And then having the wrong people in the wrong roles. And so, everybody's not a people manager. And and then making sure you have people that can actually deliver, which is important. So, um, you know, assessing all those different factors all contributes to how the culture is formed and how people respond.
Yeah, and that is spot on. I can say that. I've learned some of those things, and it's crazy how certain things that somebody from your perspective will see that should be obvious, but it's not, because like I have said coming up through the chains, and there's a lot of people who I would say were the age of 35 ish, where they probably had to learn that thing because coming up, this is your job, do it. And you're kind of like, okay, you just went and tried to do your job.
Yeah.
Where now people are like, no, and so it's if they don't understand what you're doing, you really gotta lay it out. Like you gotta
Yes.
spell things out a lot clearer than you used to. And that is sometimes easy, sometimes not. Like sometimes it's like, well, yeah, that's pretty simple. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, it's really not simple. It just depends on the situation, right? And
Yes.
and oof, I get it. And I tell our HR director, I tell her all the time, I'm like, I do not envy you not one bit, because I'm like, I know the conversations that I have to have with people. And then I know by the time it has to come to you, if it's going that far, I already know that we're on level 10.
Yeah.
We're what do they call it? DEFCON 5 or whatever they want to call it back. It's just, we're there. And I've told her, I said, I praise you for your level of
Yeah.
patience.
Yeah.
Because, my boss, he's still my boss now. When we were coming up, he was just like something, like, yeah, you're fired. Get out. You can't do that no more. Like, that is like a no. And it was something that now, I mean, back then it probably wasn't okay either, but people were just like, well, I'm fired. All right, man. See you later. Whereas
Yeah.
now it's
And sometimes
everybody.
people just need grace. It's interesting. Sometimes people just need grace. Life is happening for a lot of folks, and I tend to err on benefit the doubt and grace. Life is happening for folks, and I think fairness across that is important, and that's how you learn and grow.
Yeah. And it's growing is hard,
Yeah, right.
especially in the
I
professional
think where
world.
organizations fail is if they're not consistent. If they're forgiving of people they like and not forgiving of people they don't like, I think that's where employees build distrust.
Yeah. And then that'll lead to employee dissatisfaction, like no tomorrow.
Clearly, yeah, it
But
does.
yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen that where, you go in and you talk to somebody and they're like, well, yeah, they play favorites and this and that.
yeah,
And then you start kind of looking around and you're like, oh yeah, man. Oh yeah. I guess I really didn't see that until this person just pointed it out. You're like, oh man.
right.
People used to say that to me about how I would always tell people, I said, I'll tell you who my favorite is. Like, what? I'm like, the person who's getting me the best results and giving me the
Mm-hmm.
best efforts.
Yeah.
Those people are, I will tell you 1,000%, they're going to be my favorite.
And
Be
they
like, well,
tend to have their heads down. People that don't deliver tend to be the biggest complainers. And
oh,
so by
yes.
far, yeah.
Yeah. And I try to tell everybody, hey, it's important that the people who are in that spot, how do you get them in the fold? Like, how do you
Yeah.
bring them in?
Right.
And that
And
is
that's the
just so hard
important
to do.
aspect of it is, if that's really what they want to do. But I do believe people show up to work to contribute and give their best.
Yeah, and you said there are some disruptors out there, like you were
Oh,
saying earlier.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
There are some where it's like no matter what you do, it's just an automatic
Yeah.
problem.
Oh, yeah.
Like I could say hello and it's a problem.
Yeah.
I won't put this person, I had a disagreement with a disagreement. Didn't particularly care for the way this person handled themselves before they came to work and all sorts of things. And
Uh-huh.
I was in a different position at the time and I looked at my boss. I'm like, "Maybe we got to do something about this." I'm like, this is a problem. I'm like, this person's getting mad because I'm taking calls from their store, but the problem is they're not answering their phone.
Right.
So I kind of have to. Like, what am I supposed to do? And she
Or
would
they
go
wanna
complain.
take on more work and they're not doing the job they're supposed to do. And so
Yeah,
you're like, "W what?" So
this person would literally call my boss and go, "Yeah, Joe's running my store for me." And I'm like, "It's
wow.
because you weren't answering the phone." And I'm like,
Yeah.
and it just, and so, okay, all right, kind of navigate it, right? This person's
Yeah.
tendencies. And it was just one of those people where no matter what I did, it was a problem.
They weren't yeah. Yeah.
So I got smart and I would just be like,
That
"Hey,
happens
boss."
too,
Yeah, I just
unfortunately.
told my boss, I said, "Hey, I know you're driving by that way today.
Yeah.
Just take that care of that for me. Thanks." And then I would walk out like, I was like, "Y'all do that to me. See you later."
Right.
Eventually they moved her around and they ruffled everything up. And
Right.
that was probably the biggest sigh of relief I've ever had in my professional career in my life. I was like, oh, I can work with anybody in the organization. Be like, he can work with almost anybody. It's out of 5,000 people, there might be one or two where I'm like,
Yeah, earlier in my career, I've worked with some amazing folks earlier in my career. Amazing. And I would say they all shared some same characteristics in terms of their empathy level, their maturity level, their drive and passion for the business to be successful, pride in their work, accountability, which is huge. Accountability. I'm still friends with those individuals, and I learned a lot from them, and just amazing professionals. Amazing. So yeah. So so when you have the one offs, I call them the one offs. They're just one offs, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
but they make it seem like the end of the world is coming. And you're just
Yeah.
like, you have to
They
like
can create
talk to
havoc. They
yourself.
definitely can create havoc, but, everything's for a reason too, right? And so eventually it catches up with people
Yeah,
eventually.
and you being in Chicago, I can imagine that's a. I mean, Detroit is, I guess, if you want to call it considered a big city. I mean, we're a big metropolitan. Detroit's not as much of a big city these days, but it's on the rebound. I'll say that. They've rebuilt most of downtown.
Okay, that's
So it's
good.
starting to get nice and people are actually
Okay.
moving back. But I can imagine that environment there is like a lot more complex than it would be here,
It
where
is complex. It is very complex, and the current state has made it even more complex. And You know, I still kind of just go back to what I said earlier in our earlier conversation. People should just be where they feel they can do their best work. There are more jobs than candidates right now. And so I think this moment in time is giving people an opportunity to hit pause and say, what is it that I really want to do? What's fulfilling, right? What excites me to get up in the morning, right? And I think people are reassessing, and that's good. Right. And so I think there's going to be complexity for the upcoming years. There's going to be complexity to some degree. Right. And so it's just a matter of what complexity you want to engage with. Right. I tend to look at things differently. I look at things as, what is it that I want to do? What kind of legacy of work do I want to leave? What are my intentions around my work? And I really want to do purpose driven work at this. What am I, 58 now?
and you do not look it. I can tell you that.
Oh, thank you. I am 58. But I really want to do purpose driven work. And, I'm not going to short sight that or compromise that, because that's what's important to me. And so anything that aligns with that or supports it, I'm all for it. I think that if there's energy that can make things negative, there's also energy that can make things positive. And I truly believe that. So I'm excited about the next leg and to see what that brings. And
I'm excited for you because I
thank
mean, you're at a
you.
spot where I'm hoping to be in like a year. So I'm excited for you. I mean, that's
Thank
just,
you. I've
I
had
mean,
this plan. The funny thing, I had this plan and I kept saying, this is going to be my retirement thing. And then I kept thinking, well, you know what? Why wait until I'm 65? Why wait? Do it now. And so now this is my now, right? Everybody finds their now. This is my now. And I truly believe you do things for the right reasons and the right intentions around it, everything tends to fall in place. Now, will it be perfect? No, of course not. However, my village, my community is so supportive. And they're like, yeah, Tania, what took you so long? Because they see things that you don't see, right? And so you kind of just step into whatever is meant for you. And I truly believe whatever is meant for you, no one can take that or change that for you. And so I believe that. And so I am where I'm supposed to be at this time.
yeah. And that's kind of like where, I tell, like we were talking, that's kind of like where like the common ground, the middle ground, like I feel like that this is where, obviously I feel where I need to be.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is where a lot of people want to be, and I feel like they feel a lot more comfortable there than they do once they experience it. I feel like they're gonna feel a lot more
Well,
comfortable in
yeah.
it. You know,
Absolutely.
and that's
Absolutely.
where my whole life I used to joke, well, retire. I mean, up here we call cafes or like coffee shops a lot, or like family diners. Call them Coney Islands here. People be like, "Do you go to the Coney today?" Like, it's like a Michigan thing. So if you ever
Okay.
get some from Michigan, say Coney Island, it's like the local family mom and pop diner that serves Coney dogs.
Coney Island.
Yeah, they call them Coney Islands here, and they have like everything, all your standard sandwiches and everything, but they just call them Coney Islands. And anytime I've said it, you guys got a Coney around here, and I'm in a different city, they're like, "What?" Or it's different city, like, "What's a Coney Island? You mean a hot dog?" And I'm like, "A family diner," and they're like, "Oh yeah," I'm like, it's just so common here, and you know, and I just sat there. I'm gonna be one of those 70-year-old guys sitting there with a cup of coffee, just talking about things with people.
Right.
And then I realized I'm like, I don't want to wait that long. I want to
Yeah.
do that. I want to do that
Yeah.
now.
And life's too short, life's
You
too
never
short.
know. I mean, you
Yeah.
never know what's
So
going to happen. I mean,
never know. And I would
you know,
rather, do it in a circle where there's common ground and
right.
where there's community, right? And so, and I think that exists in many places. I've seen it several times, throughout my career. And, I think that's where the magic happens.
Yes, 1,000% it does.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that it does
Yeah.
because the negative will overshadow it, and people go, well, when you look at something that's successful, what's the thing, like you were saying, everybody understanding the mission, the
Yeah.
goal, like you
Yeah.
have to understand it.
Right.
In my company, they used to use a lot of what they call cheat sheets, kind of like where they would sum up a big novel and they would put it in a short little thing. And I'm like, well, that's great. I know this may sound dry, but it doesn't really explain things to people.
Right.
And they're like, well, that's a lot of information. I'm like, it is, but you're going to find they're going to understand a lot better if you go
Yeah.
through it with them
Yeah.
instead of going, now somebody may look at this pen and say it's blue, but what if I think it's purple or black?
Right. Right.
And then we start a big debate. But if we've got a common goal, we need to establish that the pen's blue or that it is black. Like we got to figure out how to make that happen.
Right.
And so you got to go through the boundaries with it. And
Yeah.
I think that the fact that people don't do that
Right.
is what creates the situations that you see today.
Yeah. And then you learn from each other in the banter of that, you learn from each other. You learn how to think, how they process, the why and how they process and how they think. And there's value in that as well, right?
Oh my God, I think more than probably most people know. I would probably say 80% of what I learned in my life has come from that back and forth and picking people's brains, picking my boss's brains. Like that's
Yeah.
how I've learned so much.
Right.
Like I'll pick their brains, get how they think, and then all right, then I open the book and I'm like, okay, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's like the complete opposite of how a lot of people learn, but I found that when I do that, I'm like, okay, now I understand the context.
Right.
Now
Right.
let me dive into the deep part of it. Okay,
Yeah.
and boom, now you're going to figure it out. So I've tried to change the way that, at least my corporate culture that we try to do that. And, a lot of people look at me, they're like, yeah, I can't do it that way. And I'm like, well, it's kind of what we got to do and gotta go that way. And, and I just kind of give them a look and they're like, okay, yeah, no problem. And I'm like, all right, thumbs
Right.
up, man. We're doing great.
Yeah. And support them in it, and cheer them on, support them and cheer them on. So,
It's weird that it's just so hard for people to do because it
mm,
seems like for someone like you and then definitely someone like me, I mean, that it's easier And then when you find somebody that it's not, you're kind of just, you have to remember, okay, they're not me.
Yeah.
You're trying to understand why it's so difficult for
Yeah.
them, because you're like, this would make you happier.
Yeah.
It would be easier.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of, you're going, well, what do I say to you at this point?
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. Like, I
Right.
can't explain it any further. And my wife already knows it about me. I'll look at my wife and I'll be like, okay, well, I laid all the information out. Where do we go next? My wife's like, I love you, but I'm not one of your employees. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right. I'm like, that's right.
My husband
It's
does the same thing.
it's like, yeah, I'm not one of your employees. And I'm like, oh, right, that's right. And I'm like, that's hard when you're in a higher up leadership role. When you get home, you're like, okay, yeah, they're not my subordinate.
Turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah, they're my equal, and it's like, okay, yep, my wife's my equal. That's hard for leaders. I even my boss, he and I both him and I talk, and yeah, I definitely hear him say, goes, yeah, my wife did. I'm like, yeah, I know, man. I had to do the same thing. And then I try to go in my head. I'm like, all right, was it because I was being a jerk, or what was I doing? And I'm like, do I need to make it up to
It's just
her?
conditioning. You just
Yeah.
conditioned. Yeah.
And that's hard for people,
Yeah.
just in general. It really is. They just, I don't know if you want to say don't get it,
Yeah.
so from, as we kind of wrap it up, from your perspective and your book, the feedback blueprint, right? Like, that is, I guess I didn't realize until this conversation, right? Like, I've always known feedback's important. I always have, because in the workplace, I'm constantly seeking. So for, like, the up and comers in the world out there, like, because obviously you've got like a plethora of knowledge. How can they establish that feedback routine for themselves and for the people around them, like, where they can kind of make it so they can do that? Because that's the hardest part, is being willing to accept it.
Yeah, and being open to it, right? So to receive feedback, so I look at it on two sides. To receive feedback, it's also creating conditions where the leader feels comfortable, because it's hard for some leaders to give feedback, right? So maybe open the door, and it shouldn't be once a year for the performance review. It should not be once a year, but establish a time frame that works for both parties, whether it's biweekly, monthly, what is that right cadence? And, it's real simple. What am I doing well? What should I continue to focus on to develop? And what suggestions or recommendations do you have for me to build the muscle, whether it's, say it's project management? How can I build that muscle? Where did I miss the mark? Provide examples. If the leader is giving the feedback, provide examples so that it's tangible. And then follow up. Hey, I see that you did XYZ. You're doing great. You're almost there. Continue to give feedback, right? I think performance reviews it just needs to blow it up. But, if you're giving feedback to someone regarding their performance on an ongoing basis, end of year should just really be a formality of pulling everything together, right? And that's the one time a year employees dread. What are they going to say?
Yeah.
I've seen some where it's like, yeah, back in January of 2022 did. I mean, that's just like bizarre to me. Like, how does a person grow, learn, and develop from that? Right. And I think as a leader as well, what's important for us as leaders is to make sure we give space for people to learn and grow, and don't hold on to stuff. Right. Because that does a disservice to the organization as well as that individual. But provide feedback ongoing, and then for that employee, open the door for the feedback. Hey, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on how I did on that project. Right? Don't wait until the end of year. Let me know what I did well and what should I continue to work on. Or is there internal class maybe I should take to strengthen this particular muscle? But treat it as a conversation. I think and then that builds a rapport, you're building a relationship, right? And it becomes easier and easier for both sides, right? And for that employee, even if you disagree with the feedback, it's how you hear the feedback, right? If you take the posture of, well, I disagree with that, and no, I can't believe, well, such and such is doing, then it doesn't really allow for that relationship to really form. And the next go around, the leader might not give the feedback, right? And so you don't want that either. So it's how do you give the feedback? If feedback is given, ask for examples, right? That makes it tangible. And then ask, well, what are your expectations? Like, what does progress look like for you, right? And then continue following up with that. and it's not one-sided. It's interesting. A lot of times, and employees feel you're the leader. It's your job to tell me this. It's your job to tell me that. It's your job to, and it's not. It's a partnership, right? I always say, folks that take control of their career tend to do extremely well, right? Now, their expectation of you to provide support, resources, and instruction, yes. However, it's a partnership, right? That's what makes a stronger unit.
Yeah, that is definitely something that is. I think that especially when you bring newer people in and as you're growing, you've got to make sure that they understand that part as they're coming in the door. Because if you don't ensure that they're understanding that part, it creates problems. So a big example that I use to people is I say, open door policy. It is a great thing, but open door policy becomes hazardous when people haven't learned how to work with each other. Because then the only time the open door is used is when everybody's on level 10.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I had suggested, I'm like, well, in orientation, maybe we talk about feedback and kind of how to talk to each other. And if you got a problem, this is what you do. Not just, well, if you don't like somebody, you do this and this and this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to put that there too, but we also need to be like, hey, have a conversation with your boss that can get the other
Right.
person involved. And if you want to hear something you might not want to, like, I just think that's something that, like what you said in your book, obviously. I'm going to read your book because it's something that I
Oh,
love.
thank
And if
you.
it's great, I'm gonna like make everybody in my company read it.
Okay, well, give me the feedback after you read it. Give me the feedback. I tried to make it really simple to sometimes leaders are at different places in their career, and so they might not need to read the whole book. So I tried to slice it in chapters where they could take whatever part they need and use it. And I created very simple frameworks with templates and everything in the book for folks to take and use with their team.
Yeah, it's feedback is it's so important, and it's not just it's I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. It's not just important for in order to me in order for your ability to grow,
Yeah,
but it's in order for your ability to understand. Growing is understanding, but it's also your ability. I guess to me, it teaches you how. Maybe that's a better way to put it. It teaches you how to understand things.
I had a
Like,
former coworker, and Esther used to say, I'll give her credit for that, feedback is a gift. And if you don't give the gift, then you rob them the opportunity to grow.
yeah, yeah, I mean, no doubt. I mean, it's and just so you know, I did already buy your book.
Oh, you
I just haven't
did?
received it yet. Just so
Okay.
you know, like
Okay.
I love stuff like I love stuff like that. It's I guess it's a big deal to me because like I've told you the nature of my job. I want to
Right.
put my company out there, but it's huge, and I think that applies to people out there. That applies more just work.
Yeah.
That can apply to your personal life.
Yeah.
That can apply to your interactions at the grocery store,
Yes.
especially
Yes.
when somebody's losing their ever loving mind over a coupon that's been
Right.
expired for 3 years.
I've seen it happen.
And I'm like, I just kind of sit there and I'm like, well, they're kind of telling you it's been expired for like 3 or 4 years, man.
Exactly.
They're nice about it. They're not giving you a hard time. And me being in my industry, after a while, I kind of like I try not to, but once in a while I'll butt in. I'll be like, hey, they did what they could for you.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
walk over to customer service and and they'll be like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, I don't want to overstep. Yeah, I'm
Right.
just a customer. And that really got worse after COVID.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I used to
Absolutely.
love going shopping. My wife used to say I was more of a woman in that aspect. She used to joke around because I would be like, yeah, let's go check some things out. And now I'm sitting there going, oh man, I do not want to go to the store because you're going to see one of these folks in there just having a meltdown about something. And I don't want, I deal with that all day at work. I don't want to go to the store, and
Yeah.
do that now.
That's true. That's true.
So, but yeah, I really appreciate you being on here.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, give everybody a little bit of an exit push on some of the things you got going on.
Well, so I'm opening a bookstore cafe, and we are targeted to open mid-September in Homewood, Illinois. And I'm super excited. I will have blasts on my social media, and we're creating a Facebook and all forms of, and even a TikTok. So I'm working with the team on that because that is not my superpower. And I'm just looking forward to the next part of the journey around that, and I really wanna create a community and help build the next generation of writers and poets and create a community around literacy and strengthen what's already here. There's already a foundation, and there's so many different local authors here, and there will be a space for podcasting as well. So, giving everyone a voice in whatever format they choose, whatever their jam is. So, looking forward to that.
Yeah, if
And
I'm
if
ever in
there's one
Chicago, I'm
call to
definitely coming
action
by.
I can throw out as one call of action, and that is, let's try to be kinder, gentler to one another and build a positive community.
Man, if I'm in Chicago, I'm definitely going to stop by your cafe.
You
So
better.
I most definitely will, because that would be great. I would have
Yes.
a. That's just.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to have you out to the store. I mean, we're connected now, so
yeah. I mean, Chicago's not that far away from me. I mean,
that's right.
I've
That's
been
right.
there before a couple times.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, no offense, I'm a Lions fan. I don't know if you're a Bears fan or not, but you know, diehard Honolulu Blue here. I have been to Soldier Field once.
Okay.
I thought I was gonna get beat up. Like, everybody give me
That's
that.
funny. That
You're
is
wearing a
funny.
Lions jersey here, and I'm like,
Well, I will make sure you have all the information
awesome.
before we fully launch. Yes, I would love to have you in wherever you can, give us time. Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right, Tania. Well, I thank you, and I hope you have a good day.
You
I
too.
appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.